who will allow me to be soft, who will allow me to walk in, my soft girl area. What's up, big mama? So this, what I've been really paying attention to this, right? Because I've been thinking about this, this what does soft girl mean, right? And I've been watching it, not from a distance, but I've been really, really listening because I really want to understand what women mean when they say I'm in my soft girl era. And that's there, that phrase keeps coming up more and more, especially in conversations, online content, and the way a lot of women are starting to frame what they want out of life. In this chat just a moment ago, right? Let's see. Mocha, you said, they mean they want to be a girly girl. Perfect weirdo, you said they want to be nice. And you also said feminine, right? Um, and it's this phrase, I'm in my soft girl era, right? And before I say anything else, I want to be clear about something. This isn't about attacking women. This isn't about dismissing the need for rest. Being nice. Being feminine. All of those things are good. They're needed. Um, and so and it isn't about dismissing the need for peace, right? Because a lot of I think some women say that because they want to have peace, right? They don't want to be in this place of I guess contention, feeling like they have to fight for everything. Because the reality is those things are real. Those things, are are necessary, right? So and those things are important. I appreciate that, Tracy. So the reality, right, is those things matter. But what I've noticed is that the phrase doesn't always mean what it sounds like, and that's where I started asking questions. Because when I hear someone say that they are in their soft girl era, I just hear the words. I don't just hear the words. I listen for the posture behind the words, right? What is the motivation behind the phrase, soft girl era? And I listen to what people are actually stepping into, what people are actually stepping into. So when they say I want to step into something, I'm trying to understand, okay, what are you saying or meaning that you want to step into or stepping away from, right? Because sometimes it's not just stepping into something, but they want to step away from something. So let me ask something else. Some of y'all said, being nice. You said y'all said feminine, but let's go a little bit deeper, right? What does that actually look like? So when you say, I want to be they want to be nicer. What does that look like? When let's see, somebody else said that they want to be feminine. What does that look like? When you say a girly girl, you want to be a girly girl. What does that look like? Because I really want to know what does that look like. Does it mean peace? Does it mean healing? Does it mean stability? Does it mean less responsibility? Does it mean avoiding pressure? Like what does that mean? I want some ideas. I want some feedback, from you ladies, because I don't want to make any assumptions tonight. But I want to understand when a lot of women say I want to be I'm entering my soft girl era. What does that look like? You said all that and maybe some submissiveness, letting someone lead. Okay, so that's a whole nother topic. But let me dig into that one a little bit, right? Because that sounds great, but here's the reality: a lot of men have have um, have destroyed what submissiveness really means. And so on behalf of them, I want to set that straight. Um, submissive Submission, let's break that word in half. You have sub, you have mission. Sub means to come under something. Mission is mission. So if that man, if there is no mission, then there is nothing to come under. So submission isn't a place of weakness, but it's actually it's a place of trust. So if you can't submit, you can't come under something you don't trust or someone you don't trust. So stop giving yourselves to dudes who don't have no mission, who you don't even trust. So why are you in a relationship with them if you don't trust them enough to come under and there is no mission to come under? So I'll stop right there, right? So you said when some women say they want to enter this soft girl era, they want to enter into a place, submissiveness, and so forth. But understand this, right? In that same text of where in Ephesians 5, where it says, "Wives, submit yourselves therefore to your husbands." Understand that the rest of that whole chapter is talking to the man. And the biggest responsibility of them all is not submission from a woman. It's that a husband should literally lay down his life for his wife. That is the greatest call of all. So if you you shouldn't be submitting to somebody who don't even embody, don't even know what it means to lay down his life for somebody. So I'm gonna get that one for free, right? So let's talk about, right. So y'all said they want to enter into this place, of submission. Okay, when they say soft girl era. So let's step back. Let's step back for a moment, right? Because avoiding pressure, entering to a place of submissiveness, those things require those things are those are two very different things, right? Hey, what's up, Keen? What's up, Tracy? How y'all doing tonight? So we talking about this whole idea of soft girl era, and we talking about what does that mean? What does that look like when women say, I'm entering my soft girl era? We talking about that tonight because I've had conversations where soft sounded less like healing and more like a desire to be carried, right? I'm gonna say that again. I've had conversations where soft life sounded less like healing and more like a desire to be carried, less like growth and more like a release from accountability. And I get why that sounds appealing. Life can be heavy, responsibility, can be exhausting. And carrying your own weight, making decisions, building something meaningful is not always easy. We know that to be true. So of course there is a part of people that wants relief from that. But here's the question that I had to start asking: is this about becoming whole, or is this about becoming comfortable? So we're talking about the notion of soft girl era. Is it more about being whole, or is it more about becoming comfortable? And the difference matters more than we think. So let me ask y'all another question, right? If everything in your life suddenly became easier, would it actually become better? If everything in your life became easier, would it actually become better? Yes or no? Yes or no? If everything in your life became easier, would your life actually become better? You said incognito, you said no. Tracy, you said no. All right. So give me a real example of something becoming easier but not making your life better. What's an example of that? What's an example of something being easier in your life but not necessarily making it better? Because I would agree with that, but I want to know, like, what's an example of that, of something being easy? Kids getting older, yeah, it becomes easier, but it doesn't. Graduating, okay, but not necessarily making your life better. I like that. I like that. So, and I like that because here's the reality: comfort can feel a lot like peace if you don't don't examine it closely. Comfort can feel like healing if you don't ask what it's producing in your life. And that's the part I want us to slow down and think about. What is this mindset of soft girl era actually producing? You said you said you're getting more money but life has more problems that money can't fix. Yeah, money gives the appearance of making things easier, but you're right. There are problems that money can't fix, right? And I actually released I have a YouTube I released a YouTube video on that today on my YouTube channel for men. So that's very true, right? Because here's when we think about what mindset this notion of soft girl era actually producing, we have to ask questions like: Is it producing discipline? Is it producing clarity? Is it producing emotional stability? Or is it producing passivity? I'm breaking up for you. Hopefully it gets better. I'm not sure why, but yeah. So we have to ask those questions. It or is it? Can y'all hear me? Can everybody hear me? Okay. 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 I appreciate that. So yeah. So we have to ask those questions. Is it? Is it produce? What is it actually you moving kind of phrase. So I hope it gets better. So log out or tap out and then tap back in. So so we also have to ask, or is it just making life, feel lighter in the moment? Because those are two very different outcomes. And here's where it gets, important. If the goal is to build a meaningful life, a stable relationship, or a strong future, then at some point, strength has to be developed, right? Not just softness, not just ease, strength. So let me ask y'all this honestly. Do you when women do you believe and y'all can just speak for women, right? Most of y'all are women in here. Do you believe that most women want who subscribe to this notion of soft girl era, do you think that they want a life that feels soft, or do you think they want a life that can actually sustain them? Do you think they want a life that feels soft, or a life that can actually sustain them? What do you think is the preference? Is the better is the most likely preference? A life that feels soft, or a life that can actually sustain them? Because those two don't always come packaged the same way, right? Those two are not always the same thing. And I'm not saying you can't have peace. I'm not saying you can't have rest. I'm not saying you shouldn't desire a life that feels lighter than what you have experienced before. But I am saying this: if softness becomes an excuse to step away from growth, responsibility, and discipline, it will cost you more than you realize. So the question becomes this: Are you choosing softness as a form of healing or as a form of escape? Because how you answer that question, right? How you answer that question um, will shape who you become. And that's where this conversation really begins. Now let's talk about all of us, because this isn't just individual. This is cultural. We are living. Hey, what's up? How you doing tonight? So we are living in a time where comfort is being marketed as a lifestyle goal, and not just physical comfort. I'm talking about emotional comfort. I'm talking about mental comfort. Hey, welcome back, sweet. I'm talking about relational comfort. Everything is about protecting your peace, guarding your energy, removing anything that feels heavy in your life, difficult or challenging. We see this all the time on social media. They say, I'm getting rid of this and I'm getting rid of that. We see that all the time. And on the surface, it sounds really good. It sounds wise. But let me ask you something. What happens to a person who removes everything that challenges them? What happens to a person who removes everything in their life that challenges them? That's a question. They don't grow. Yep. Yep. They don't grow. What else? What happens to a person who removes everything that challenges them? What's some other things that happens? They don't grow. What else? Hey, what's up, Black Rose? They lose their self. How so? What they lose their self, and what way? So what happens? The question is, what happens to a person who removes everything from them, for everything that challenges them from their life, what happens to that person? So, so I want y'all to think about, just kind of give you an example. I want you to think about a so a butterfly, right? Or let's say you have a caterpillar that's in a cocoon, and that caterpillar, you said, because sometimes your struggle makes you stronger, and that's exactly what I'm about to say. So a caterpillar, right? It goes through a cocoon process, and that caterpillar, what most people don't know is that caterpillar melts into like a liquid form inside of the cocoon, and as it transforms into a butterfly inside of the cocoon, it goes through a process to where it has to literally break out of the cocoon. So let's say you want to help the butterfly along as it's breaking out of this cocoon, and you cut it open to try to help it get out of you two out. And so you want to help it break out of this cocoon a lot faster. I talked about this. What do you think is going to happen to that butterfly? That butterfly is going to die because it won't be able to fly. So you tried to help it out of this hard process, out of this challenging process, but what you did is you interrupted the process for it to develop the wings to be able to fly. So a person who removes everything that challenges them from their life, they cannot fly. They cannot. They somebody said they don't grow. Somebody said they lose themselves. Absolutely right. So when we try to rush our process of getting out of everything that's hard in our lives, we're only stifling our own selves, right? So let me ask this: what happens to discipline when life is designed around ease? What happens to discipline when life is designed around ease? Because here's what we don't want to admit. Here's what we don't want to admit. Growth is uncomfortable, right? How many of y'all can agree with that? Growth is uncomfortable. Maturity is uncomfortable. So if your life is designed to eliminate, um, uh, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. So if your life is designed to eliminate discomfort, what exactly are you developing? Let that sizzle in your spirit, like let that sit in your spirit for a second. So, Country Wayne. So, if your life is designed to eliminate discomfort, what exactly are you developing? That's the tension that we have today. So, if you're trying to remove everything that's difficult from your life, what are you developing? And this is where the soft girl era ideal becomes dangerous. Not because softness is wrong, but because it's being misunderstood. Softness is being framed as the absence of pressure instead of the presence of peace. And those are not the same thing. Softness, I'm gonna say that again. Softness is being framed as the absence of pressure instead of the presence of peace, right? So you said it's okay to be soft. You're right. You're right. Because softness is a spirit, not an error. See, when people say I'm entering my soft girl era, that when they add that word era, it's flawed. The softness is not an error. Softness is a spirit. God has called us to have a spirit of softness. He is soft. He is gentle. He is patient. Softness is not an error. It's a spirit. So there is nothing wrong with softness. It's actually great to be soft. The problem is when we say is when we frame it as being a season of life. Softness is not a season of life. You either soft or you not. It's not something that you could turn on and turn off. You either like so we just gonna leave it right there. So I want y'all to understand that you can have peace and still carry responsibility. You can have peace and still be disciplined. You can have peace and still face hard things. So let me ask you directly: have you started avoiding things that require effort because they don't feel peaceful? Ooh, I like that one. Have you started avoiding things that require effort because they don't feel peaceful? How many times in your life, be honest, How many times in your life have you said, this don't feel good? This feels scary. I can't trust this. So you shun it. When God could be using he could be using that thing to develop some things into you. There is a scripture that says that it talks about what patience produces, what struggle produces, right? What gentleness produces, what all of these things produces, right? So it's the hard things in life, the challenging things in life that oftentimes produce something inside of us. And here's another question: Have you labeled necessary pressure as something negative? Have you ever labeled something that could be considered as necessary pressure in your life as something negative? Have you convinced yourself that anything uncomfortable must be unhealthy? You said you learned you are a Hebrew Israelite after living as a Christian so long, so definitely living proof. Okay, that's a different conversation. That's a different conversation. Um, you can hit me up in the DM. We can talk about that. Have you, another question? Another question is: Have you convinced yourself that anything uncomfortable must be unhealthy? Because if we're honest, right, a lot of a lot of people, a lot of what people are calling protecting their peace is actually avoiding accountability, right? Avoiding growth, avoiding responsibility. And over time, what that does is that creates a version of you that feels good in a moment, but not prepared for reality. I'm gonna say that again. When we live our life as protecting ourselves, when we say things like, I'm protecting my peace, when in reality we are avoiding responsibility, what that does is that creates a version of us that feels good in a moment, but is not prepared for reality. You say yes, it gets greater later. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, um, how many, we have to be careful not to avoid the hard things because reality does operate on comfort. Reality will require you to show up when you don't feel like it. Reality will, require you to push through when it's inconvenient. You said, my past gives me strength to know what I can get through. The hard things help us grow. You said pressure make diamonds. Absolutely, pressure makes diamonds. Fire make refines gold. Like, we can go on and on and on about the hard things in life makes us better. So the real question is this: Are we building lives that feel good or lives that are actually strong? Are we building lives that feel good or are we building lives that are actually strong? Only you can answer that question. Now let's bring this into alignment spiritually, right? Because this is where clarity really matters. God never called us to a life of constant comfort. And I want y'all to think about the one of the greatest stories, right? Build lives that can survive 1000%. So I want y'all to think about, Jesus before he went to the cross, right? When it said he was sweating blood, drops like blood. And he said, Father, if it is your will, please let this cup pass from me. Please let me not have to go to this cross. Please let me not have to go through what I'm about to go through. But nevertheless, let your will be done. And that's where I want to really layer this part of the conversation in, because God never called us to a life of conflict, but He did call us to a life of peace. And those two things are very different. Peace is internal, comfort is external. Peace comes from alignment with God because God is peace. Comfort comes from controlling your environment. And when you read scripture, you don't see people who were called into ease. You see people who were called into purpose, and purpose often came with pressure. So let me ask you something. If God is forming you, shaping you, developing you, what would that process, or would that process always feel comfortable? If God is forming you, shaping you, developing you, would that process always feel comfortable? If any of you, you said what don't kill you makes you stronger. 1,000. Like if any of you have a daughter, right, and you've done your daughter's hair, and let's say your daughter is tender headed, or you're tender headed, right? You want that hairstyle. They want that hairstyle. You want it to look nice. You want it to look great. But the process of getting it to look nice is what to a tender headed person? It's pain, it's discomfort, right? So you, if you ask it, if you know, if you stop in the middle of the hairdo or the hairstyle, you ain't gonna have that end product. You ain't gonna have that end result. Why? Because you wanted to get out of it. Hey, what's up, exotic? You wanted to get out of it and end it before the process was over. So it's not going to always feel comfortable when God is forming us and shaping us. It's going, sometimes it's going to stretch us, right? Sometimes it's going to challenge us to be better, to be different, right? And let me be transparent with y'all, right? I'm an introvert by nature. I'm an introvert. And so me being, on a live stream, me doing this, I still don't call myself a streamer, but I'm here because my purpose is to motivate and inspire people to live and think higher mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. One day you're gonna see me on a TED Talk. One day you're gonna see me, doing interviews, being interviewed by Harvard Business Review, right? Being like, you're gonna see something national, something global, where people are going to be talking to me about what I'm building. So I got to go through this process of stepping outside of my comfort zone, right? As Rello say, as people say, give more energy. Like people want to have more energy. Like people want to understand. So that process of growth, right, of being is stretching for me. It's challenging for me, right? So every time, for God to get us to the place of where He wants us to be, is sometimes it is going to stretch us. Sometimes it is going to challenge us. And so I'm going to ask this, right? You say I always remind myself I'm stronger than anything I go through. 100, right? So another question is, would it, so the reality is that, right, it's going to require us to grow in ways that are not always easy. That is the reality. That is the reality, because we have to be careful not to build a version of life that prioritizes comfort over calling. It don't feel comfortable for us to step outside of our comfort zone. It don't feel comfortable, for us to go through those painful seasons of life. You said life can't always be sweet. No, it can't. You got the oven. You sometimes you got to be placed in the oven so that you can be, formed. Sometimes you have to be placed, it has to rain for you to see grass grow. You said that makes you realize the good we won't know what good it is if we didn't have the bad. Yep, for real. So here's the thing is that God taught Jesus never told people to avoid difficulty. He taught them how to endure it. He taught them how to stand in truth, even when it costs something. He taught them how to grow through pressure, right? Not to run from it. So the question becomes this: are you asking God, and I want you to be honest, are you asking God to remove everything uncomfortable in your life? Or are you asking Him to strengthen you through it? Let's slow down right there and be honest. Are you asking God to remove everything uncomfortable in your life, or are you asking Him to strengthen you through it? Think about your prayers. Think about all the things you ask God, and you when you're going through hard times. Are you asking Him to remove those everything that's uncomfortable, or are you asking Him to strengthen you through it? You said give you the strength through it, and show you, um, so when, and show you when it's bad for you. You have said both. Yep. I think a lot of us have all said said definitely, ask God to remove the uncomfortable things. All right, because the reality is those are very two different prayers. You said open your eyes to see. Those are two very different prayers, right? Because and one leads to growth, whereas the other leads to stagnation. One leads to growth, whereas the other one lead to stagnation. God's goal is not for you to feel good. His goal is for you to become whole, and wholeness requires development. It requires refinement. It requires moments where you are stretched beyond what feels easy. So if your definition of peace removes all pressure, you may be unintentionally resisting the very process that God is using to help you go. You said chances make champions. Yep. So let's talk now. This is where it gets personal, because this isn't about a trend. You said strength and understanding. This isn't about a trend. This is about who you are becoming. So let me ask you a few honest questions, right? Um, what have you been avoiding lately because it feels uncomfortable? What have you been avoiding lately? What have you been avoiding, Miss Tagged America, because it feels uncomfortable? What have you been avoid? What have we been avoiding because it feels uncomfortable? You said people that take you out of your character. Well, that you should. I mean, that's you shouldn't want to be around people who take you out of your character, right? But if they can take you out of your character, is it their fault? Or do that, is that your responsibility, right? Because nobody should have that type of power over you to take you out of your character, right? You said are people that lead you to lose focus. That is a thing. That is distractions. Let's call those people distractions. um I am supposed to stop smoking, on Sabbath, and that's been hard for you. Okay, I appreciate the honesty there. You said, remember, I brung up, or you brung up your spiritual growth. Yep. So yeah, that's all of those are good, right? So you say yes, but I will guide first. All right. So what do you mean by that? So here's the thing, right? Here's a bigger question that I want y'all to get. You said discipline. What responsibility have you been stepping away from in the name of protecting your peace? So let's frame it like that. What responsibility have you been stepping away from in the name of protecting your peace? So we going so I like those responsibilities. Let's what responsibility are you stepping away from in the name of protecting your peace? So we're not talking about, bad things that you would think as a bad thing. What responsibilities are we stepping away from in the name of protecting our peace? That's a hard question right there. So I'm gonna let y'all sit with that one. And here's another way of putting it. What areas of your life are staying the same because you've chosen comfort over growth? What areas of your life are staying the same because you've chosen comfort over growth? So when you talk about, you know um, something that's hard, right? A habit, breaking a habit. Oftentimes that's just a decision. The reason why oftentimes we can't break certain habits is because we like how it feels. We like, how it makes us feel while we're doing it, and we don't want to make the decision to let it go. So you said self-control, right? We like, listen, let's be honest. Let's be honest. Like, the enemy is not going to tempt you with something that you don't like. He ain't gonna tempt you with something that don't feel good to you, that don't taste good to you, that don't make your flesh feel good. He gonna tempt you with something that you like, right? So that's the whole point of it. So what areas of your life again are staying the same because you choose comfort over growth. And here's a deeper one. If you continue on this path for the next year, who will you become? Will you become stronger? Will you become more disciplined? Will you become more aligned, or just more comfortable? Because comfort feels good in the moment. What's that? What you know? Growth builds something that lasts. So maybe the shift isn't to reject softness completely. Maybe the shift is to redefine it. What if softness isn't about you know avoiding pressure, but maintaining peace while handling it? I'm gonna say that again in a second. You said we scared to find out. Sometimes you're right. You said nervous get back into field. Yep. So the moment we admit something, the moment we are vulnerable about something, you said we're scared by sometimes. That's because so a lot of times when we're vulnerable and when we're honest with ourselves, then the things that have strongholds over us are broken. Their power is broken in our lives. So let me encourage you that the first step is to be honest, to be transparent about those things that's holding you back, those things that you don't want to admit that you're dealing with, right? So what and here's another question. What is softness? What if softness, you said you don't fail until you don't try. Yep. Um, what what if softness is about stepping away from responsibility, but about carrying it with stability? What if softness wasn't about shrinking your life, but strengthening your foundation? Because you can be soft in spirit and still be strong in discipline. You can be peaceful and still be productive. You can be grounded and still be growing. So the question is not, am I in my soft era? The real question is, am I becoming stronger or just more comfortable? That's one of the key questions tonight. Am I becoming stronger or am I just becoming more comfortable? See, sometimes, and because here's the reality, sometimes we think that, oh, it's a you're becoming stronger, when in reality you're just becoming more comfortable. And this is where so this is where we bring it all together, right? Because this conversation isn't about criticizing the soft girl era trend. It's about correcting direction. We don't need less peace. We need more strength. We need more discipline. We don't need to eliminate rest. We need to redefine it. We don't need to run from pressure. We need to grow through it. You said, I want to be in myself though. I think most women do. That's what we're talking about tonight. So there's nothing wrong with softness, but it's not an era. It's not a season of life. It's a heart posture. It's a spirit. So if you are living for God and you're being led by the spirit, then the fruit of that is going to be softness. Oftentimes when people say I want to be in my soft girl era, they frame it from the standpoint of, oh well, I want somebody who's going to allow me to step into this. That's the wrong posture. That's not true softness. Softness True softness only comes from one place, one source, and that's God. Softness as submitting to a man. Listen, you said you should do it on your own. That's a whole that's a whole nother topic, right? And we talked about this earlier. Submission is not a place of weakness. Submission is trust. Submission is coming under a shared mission. So if that man does not have a mission, there is not, or if there is no mission, there is nothing to come under. So the problem oftentimes is not with a man or with somebody. The problem is with a choice, a decision, because nobody made you choose that man. Nobody made you choose somebody. So 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 choose better. is what I'll say to that. Stop. So, oh man, y'all gonna make me go somewhere else with this. What Dr. Umar say? He said women oftentimes in your 20s you go for the bad boys, in your 30s you go for the pretty boys, and then by the time you get to your 40s, you all used up by the bad boys and the pretty boys that you all messed up and emotionally so, mentally so, because you chose the wrong people in your 20s and in your 30s. So the point is choose better, because if you choose better, you're going to choose a man who will lay down his life for you, who will love you well, who will love you properly. So you won't have no problem submitting to him. So the problem ain't the man, it's the choice. And yes, the man has a responsibility. Go to my YouTube channel. I'm doing a whole male series dealing with the man. So choose better. You said I submit. I know my role in any relationship or situation. It's automatic. Um, m- let him be a husband. Don't just submit to anybody just because he's a male. You said you had to learn to submit. That's beautiful, because there's power, there's strength in that. So we might talk about that next week. So here's the thing, right? We don't need less peace, right? We need more strength. You said to your husband, yep. We need to redefine it. We need to run. We don't need to run from pressure. We need to grow through it. So let me leave you with this, right? What kind of people are we becoming if comfort becomes the goal? What kind of people are we becoming if comfort becomes the goal, right? So, what kind of lives are we building if ease is the priority? What kind of future are we preparing for if we avoid everything that challenges us? Because at some point, life will require more from you than comfort can provide. I'm going to say it again. At some point, life is going to require more from you than comfort can provide. And when that moment comes, the question will not be how peaceful you felt. It's going to ask you for a price. It's going to show you a price tag. It will be how prepared you are in that moment. That's what it's going to be about. So maybe this isn't about a soft girl era. Maybe this is about a strong, grounded, disciplined era with peace at the center of it. And that's a different kind of life. A life where you don't run from pressure, you rise through it. So this week, here's the real question I want you to sit with. Are you building a life that feels good, or a life that can actually stand? Are you feeling a life that feels good, or a life that can actually stand? I am Dr. Motivate, and this is where we grow. So I appreciate y'all tuning in to another edition of Motivate Monday. We're gonna come back. You said I asked, can you do both? Yep. So we're gonna be back again next Monday. We might talk about this a little bit more. There are other things that came up. So I appreciate y'all. I hope y'all have a blessed week. Enjoy the rest of your night. And I want to hope I see y'all back next week. So I appreciate you, Rello.